In this lecture, we're going to look at another way of canceling uploads. The other approach is by using navigation guards. In the previous section, we extensively went over how navigation guards work and what they can be used for. I introduced 3 navigation guards for when a user is entering a new route. There's a 4th guard I didn't go over. You can run a guard for when a user leaves a route. The 4th guard can be defined inside the component. However, we face an issue. Navigation guards must be defined in the component that's registered to the router. The upload component is not the component we registered on the manage route. It's a child component of the manage component. Open the manage component file. Inside the exported object, define the function before route leave. Like all navigation guards, we can use the parameters to, from, and next. Here's where the issue arises. We don't have access to the data in the upload component. It is isolated even though we're using it as a child component. We can resolve this issue by using a feature called references. References are a way to select an element in the document. In JavaScript, there's already a method for selecting elements in the document. First, you would assign the element you'd like to select with an ID or class. Then, you would select it via the document object. The question is, why does Vue introduce a feature for selecting elements when vanilla JavaScript can do the trick? There are a few reasons for using references. The first reason is because they allow you to select components. Components can expose methods and properties to references. It opens the door for some interesting features and design patterns. You'll see an example in the next lecture. The second reason is because it makes it easier to select elements. Components are reusable. If you have an element with an ID, you may not be able to select that element if the component it's in is used multiple times. You can switch to classes, but what if you want to select an element in a specific instance of a component? You'd need to have a special ID assigned to the element. This can make things tricky. References were introduced to make selecting elements in your component easier. References are scoped to the component they're in. For example, let's say you had a component being used twice in an app. Both components' references are independent from one another. You don't need to provide unique IDs every time. Vue will handle keeping them separate. Before we dive back into our project, I want to make one important point about references. They're not a frequently used feature in Vue. There are usually better alternative solutions. However, at the end of the day, references may just be the solution you're looking for when everything else doesn't work. Inside the template block of the manage component, we're going to attach the reference property to the app upload component. We'll call it upload. The ref attribute will create a reference to the element you're adding it to. The value of the attribute will be the name of the reference. Next, in the before route leave function, we can interact with the component by using the following: this.refs.upload. The refs object is an object defined by Vue. It's injected into every instance and component. It'll contain a list of references registered in your application. A reference can be registered by adding the ref attribute to an element in the template. Each object in the refs property represents the DOM element on the page. The object itself contains information about the element, such as its attributes and values. With references, we can call a method inside the component we're accessing. This isn't something that was ordinarily available before using references. We don't have a method we can call, so let's create one. Back over to the upload component, we're going to create a method called cancel uploads. We're going to use the same code we used in the before unmount lifecycle function. We'll copy it over like so. We don't want the before unmount function to get called. We're going to comment it out. Next, we'll go back to the manage component to call the cancel uploads method using the reference. Lastly, call the next function. The user won't be able to navigate away from the page if this function isn't called. It's an important step. We'll give the upload one last test. I'll upload a file and navigate away right afterward. The console will log the Firebase error again. It'll contain the same error code we saw before. The user has canceled the upload. Alright, let's discuss why you might choose one approach over the other. Both solutions are suitable. In our case, canceling uploads in the lifecycle function is the more appropriate way to handle things. It's less code, and we don't have to call it ourselves because Vue will call it for us. The second approach requires more code, but it may be the solution you're looking for. You may want to perform multiple tasks when a user leaves a route. Having components call their own lifecycle functions can become hard to manage. With navigation guards, you give yourself more control in the order of execution. It is a bit excessive in this example. However, I wanted to show you in case you run into a scenario where you will need to call a child's method. I'm going to comment out the before route leave navigation guard in the manage component. Next, I'll uncomment the before unmount lifecycle function in the upload component. This is the solution we'll be using for this course. There's one more thing I want to point out. It's important to keep an eye on your application with the developer tools. The console didn't catch this problem, nor did we see anything suspicious on the page itself. We were able to catch the problem after viewing the network panel. Just because an error isn't being produced doesn't mean that it isn't a problem. It's always a good idea to keep an eye on the requests being made to prevent the overuse of bandwidth.